afternoon. It's annual sign, and today is October 19th, and it is Project Unify. So I'm going to admit people into the phone call, and so join the conversation. Hey, Dave, are you there?
I am.
Ah,
I'm sparing you my video. I've been doing yard work, a lot of it.
oh, I do hope you turn it on though sometime. It's so cold when people are not on their videos.
Yeah.
Hey, Daniel, I got a competing meeting that I'm gonna go to for the beginning of this meeting,
Okay.
and then I'll come back.
Great.
Daniel, feel free to send the people from HC, whatever it was, CHCS, just send them the paper,
All
you
right,
know,
okay.
and just tell them, we looked at your website, we thought that this would be of interest, right?
Yeah, it's always hard to know who to send it to though.
Send it to the CFO or CEO, the CEO.
I've spoken to her off and on for years.
Oh, so you know her. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So then
No.
I didn't find anything new then. Okay.
No, I don't know about that, but I don't. Always good to have more material to share with people, especially if they're in a state that we want to have participating in our work.
Yeah. Or, maybe just ask her how does she think that what we are, proposing would intersect with some of the things that they're working on. All right.
Yeah.
I gotta go.
We'll
Bye.
see you when if you come back.
Right.
All right. There we are. Hello. I'm trying to log in on my cell phone as well to see what it actually looks like. Christine, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
I have been all day long. It's like, not sure if it's a hearing problem or just a problem or very disconcerting when you don't know if you're being heard.
Yeah.
As it were.
Oh, good.
Hello, Matt.
How's it going?
It is excellent. I'm back from San Diego. I was in San Diego last week. So
Then we had a lot of audio issues last week, but we should be good this week.
yeah,
Are
I
you
was in
missing
the hotel room trying to take the phone call. Didn't have good service.
missing the California sun now that you're back in Hudson?
You know, it was really gloomy in San Diego. It was
Really?
yeah,
It was rainy last week in San Diego.
it was terrible. It was kind of nasty looking actually. Especially kind
Except
of
for the Dodgers.
right, well, They were sending all the love there, right? No, I was woefully disappointed in the lack of it, although it was fun to be there. It was the first trip I took to the West Coast in, I guess, almost 3 years, something like that. So it was nice to get back to California, see all the great stuff that's going on there. We were at the County Welfare Directors Association meeting, all the counties. So there were like 1,200 people at this event, and it was like a reunion because really they hadn't seen each other either. So there's like everybody was having a good time chatting it up, which was nice to see. But the CDSS commissioner, Kim Johnson, spoke. She opened up the event and she spoke a lot about the tsunami of programs that are coming down into California.
Yeah.
Measured in the billions of dollars, one after another, after another, after another. It's good time to be in California, I think, or maybe not, but coming up. They just don't have people that do the work, which is interesting. You know, the counties don't have people. So that's kind of rough. Sid, are you seeing that happening out there? You're hearing of that yet, or is it just coming out?
Yeah, it's there are a lot of parallel tracks that ought to be better connected, and a lot of fear about falling off a fiscal cliff when the state's embarrassingly large budget surpluses become sizable opposites. And so some of the counties and school districts we've talked to are very nervous about buying into some of the newer programs.
Yeah, I can imagine. You know, these swings happen very quickly sometimes. So, and no one wants to get their heart broken when their favorite program gets taken away one more time. Just when you're starting to make some progress, and then the rug gets pulled out from under you. So that's a story we are hearing a lot from people. But how do we get sustainability for these projects?
Well, some of the ones are having multi-year funding, which is helpful. You know, when you fund stuff for 3, 4, 5 years, then assuming that
it helps, and there's always this sort of talk about a sustainability plan, but those are, in my experience, pretty unrealistic. You know, except in the case where something becomes a Medicaid or other sort of third-party payer benefit. And beyond that, we haven't come up with any sort of sustainable mechanisms that I can think of. But I may be missing some things from some other sectors. Like, I don't know if block grants or anything like that have ever increased. I mean, usually they don't, right? They're just sort of stuck, and so then they buy you less and less and less every year, as opposed to more and more.
Well, and the more the different programs and agencies are connecting, the better the chances are for sustainability with multi-funding. But if you live in a silo, multi-funding is a curse word.
That's true. But hopefully we're going to be hearing more, from the federal government, at least, about this issue of braiding and blending funding, and how they're going to make it much easier to do. And also, not just the funding, but the reporting, because that's the kicker. You braid it, if you blend the funding together, then how do you tease out your reporting on your outcomes?
Yep.
And so that has got to get blended as well. And I know that was one of the most exciting things I heard from Dr. Sandy Ford from the Executive Office of the President in that recent presentation that she gave to the Aligning for Health group, as well as the conversation that Daniel and I had with her, was that recognition that has got to be solved, and that's one of their top 3 priorities to accomplish in a very short time period, because that'll make a huge difference.
We're up to 1974 and the Allied Services Act.
Talk about going backwards. I
That's
don't know.
progress. That's progress.
Okay.
Um,
All right,
Speaking of-
Daniel, I think we've got a quorum here to get started.
Oh, we've already gotten started. So little do they know. I did actually just to the unconference conference we're having here. So just in terms of 1974, this isn't 1992. But I was involved years and years and years ago with the tribal communities around Executive Order 477. I think it was Executive Order. Anyways, the link for it is there. And a group in Alaska were able to sort of bring funding together and then report it back to the feds in some more consolidated fashion. And when I read that, we presented it. It said you were probably at that conference at Yale, and we presented that with the folks from Alaska, and people said, "Holy smokes, why don't we just adapt that for HHS?" And it didn't happen yet, but it recapitulates again that idea of blending funding, but then also being able to report back those funding streams in some way that everybody can sort of agree to, 80%, something like that. So if you're interested, this was actually an amazing group of stuff. All right, so welcome everybody. I'm Daniel, and we've got a good crowd here today. Eliel, I think I saw you join earlier. Eliel, are you there?
Yes, I'm
Where you
here.
are.
Can you hear me
Where you
okay?
are. Oh, I think you must be on the second.
No,
screen.
he's there and he's on camera, Daniel.
Yes,
Can
you
you
are
hear
on the
me?
second screen. I've got this
Yeah.
giant screen, and you've got an overload today. So welcome to the chaos here. And so for those who know, Eliel is going to be our featured presenter discussant today, I might say more aptly, as we continue our dialogue around what's cool stuff that's going on in Texas and at Dell. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But we have some new participants on the call today, or people we haven't seen in a long time. So our custom here is just to say hello and introduce yourself just for a second. And then I'll walk through the agenda, a couple of items on the agenda I want to share, and then we'll jump right into the discussion presentation for that. So I'll call on the first person, and so Joanna Thurston is on your right smack in the middle of the screen on the top. So welcome, greetings.
Joanna, you're muted. I think it's on your end because I don't see it. All right. Ken, do you want to introduce
Okay.
Joanna for herself? Or I can do that. So Joanna is the project officer with the ACF Interoperability Initiative, working with Ken Salyards and some other folks who are probably about to introduce themselves. So with the Administration for Children and Families.
Thanks, Christine.
I hope we get your audio back. So Sal Rana.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Sal Rana. I'm the technical project manager on the ACF Interoperability Initiative with Gold Belt Frontier.
Hey, nice to hear your voice. And then Melissa Hensley. I might.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Melissa Hensley. I am with the State of Colorado Office of eHealth Innovation. And I am the interoperability product strategist, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Jim. It's good to see you.
You too. Sorry, I'm at a hotel at a conference.
It's all right. I see your picture.
Anybody else new to the call today?
I think your resident Scottish person may be new to the call, Daniel.
Well, hello,
Hi, everybody. My name's David Robertson, and I am from Scotland by invite, in that we've done an awful lot of work, and I led the programme in Scotland of joining up health and social care a few years ago. And I am very interested. I'm here to learn. but also if we've come across, shall we say, familiar issues previously and maybe overcome them, that might help from some of the lessons learned here. Because we did build an interoperable framework across Scotland for child protection, health, social work, and also with the local authorities and the police. A few years ago now, but it's still working and it's still going strong. And I'm really interested to see all of the developments that are happening across the pond, if you like. So if there's anything that I can add to the discussion, I will. It's lovely to see you.
Okay, good to see you, David. And you'll see yourself on the agenda shortly for a date for a time
book is
to,
being written about the Prime Minister's time in office. Apparently, it's going to be out by Christmas. Is that the release date or the title?
Okay, thank you for that that Keir Starmer quote. We have as much fun with our prime ministers as you've had with previous presidents.
So I guess I shouldn't have muted Chuck then.
I just wanted to say a brief hello again to the group. David's a hard introduction to follow, but Lou Brown in this capacity supporting the ACF Zane Network School Belt team working on human services referrals. Good to see you all.
Hey, Lou. You're sort of in that the onus. You know, you were there, you've been there. So, but anyone else who feels like they want to introduce themselves, they haven't been here in a while. My good friend Sid Gardner, and former board member of Stewards of Change from Southern California. It's great, always great to see you. So great. So everyone's here. We have let me just put one slide up here. There's a couple things. Where to go? A second here. So you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to open the first moment. Have there been any other updates or news? I know there have been some connectathons and some stuff like that. Anybody have any late breaking stuff on that that's important for people to know about? No?
Another one coming soon.
Another one coming soon. Okay. We had talked a couple weeks ago with Brian about reactivating a couple of, one of the work groups on the homeless side of things. So that is still in the planning and development phase of it, and that's probably focused around Minnesota and Hennepin County, which is one of the proof of concept sites that's interested in chronic homelessness. They've had some turnover on Connor Johnson, who was one of our leads there, along with Jessica, has emigrated back to the great Golden State in Southern California. So Minnesota just couldn't hold on to him. So they've got some new personnel coming in, but they have continuity planned into their transition. So that should be good. So when that gets started up again, we may want to think about inviting folks into that work group, since you guys have done so much work on it already. So the thing I wanted to mention here is, as we're thinking about the rest of the year, you'll see on the bottom of the slide here, there's a couple of other sessions coming up. The Electronic Health Records Association folks, which next week, Hans and his crew, and then Evelyn will be back with us in a couple of weeks, talk about gravity and the like, and intersections. And then David, we're thinking of, I'm not sure when in November or in December, to schedule a time to hear more about Scottish implementation and bring our, maybe sort of focus on outside of the country a little bit and some of the innovative stuff that's going on there. And I'm sure Jim would have some stuff to say relative to the work with both HL7 and also the World Bank, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds great.
Okay, so we'll look for a date.
Hey, Daniel, before we get beyond updates, and my apologies if I have if I missed the opportunity you put before me 60 seconds ago or so.
Yeah.
I did want to mention that that out of the HL7 Human and Social Services Working Group, we have a group that is working on has been reviewing and developing a human services directory implementation guide, and we're doing an ad hoc connectathon next Tuesday, the 25th, to test out that IG in that implementation guide, in hopes that it can then be balloted for standard trial use 1, STU1, in January. So I just wanted to give folks a heads up that that's going on. And of course, next Wednesday, I'll give a report on how that Connectathon actually went.
Super.
And I know Eric had mentioned to us privately that he reminded us that we have the Gravity Affinity Pilot Working Group, or Pilot Affinity Working Group, that is now meeting once a month. And each month we have a small group of folks that are doing presentations on their pilot and lessons learned.
So Brian, that's great. That actually is a great intersecting point. So when Evelyn is here the week after next, a couple of weeks, I think we're on break next week because it's the APHSA ISM conference. And then we come back the following week and then she's back there. So that might be a great time to bring, everybody who's involved with so many of those pieces together, which would be terrific. It leads to the proposal point, but I want to just ask a question about the NSF grant, because I think with Matt, didn't you, the National Science Foundation awarded some initial grants for their innovative series. Was that, Matt, was that you or Eric or Brian? Did you send that along?
I think we were emailing or emailing about it, but I don't think there was any kind of final word on that. Brian, do you remember what Daniel's referring to?
No, I don't.
Okay.
All right. Well, I thought there was some. I'll check my record. But in terms of the National Science Foundation, all the work you guys did around the use cases and the consent, they haven't awarded those dollars yet, and that's a significant amount of money. Maybe Paul sent it to me, is where I got it from. In terms of, I think they actually made some commitments already, which was interesting. So what I want to suggest here is, as we've been working on sort of filling out the rest of the year, and looking at topics that will sort of support and educate and stimulate our thinking and have some fun with. It occurred to me that we're coming up on the anniversary of the National Action Agenda, which in January 2021, we actually kicked off a lot of the work over COVID with a lot of people on this call and many, many others. And as we've been thinking about what do we do now, how do we, what's the next pivot here? The idea of maybe doing a sort of a synthesizing webinar, like a variation on one of the NAA ones for a couple hours, do some breakouts, and invite in and back, 3 or 4, 5 or 6 of the presenters over the last 6 months, anyone else as well, and see if we can sort of weave together what we've been learning and kind of get a sort of a next version of what we came out with last year, and see if we can build on that, and then sort of set that towards maybe a January or a June kind of in-person event, where we can focus on consent-related activities. So I wanted to put that out there. Christine and I have talked about it a little bit. It'll take a little bit of work, and so I guess if this at all interests you, raise your hand, put your name in the chat. Send me an email, because it should be kind of interesting to try to do that work, especially with just so much activity going on these days now with the actual confluence of stuff. So I don't know if there's any commentary on that, Christine, you might have, or others, any kind of response or thought around value of that at this point.
So Daniel, I just wanted you to clarify when you want people to say whether they're interested in sort of that first piece of like helping to think through how to put together a synthesis, one of these meetings that's sort of a synthesis, and then from there, the next piece, or are you asking for both? Like the longer term commitment as well as the short term commitment?
No, I think just the short term right now.
Okay, okay.
Let's just try to bring our thinking together with the view of, hey, next year, you know, we have a couple of different great platforms to be able to do that within.
Okay, okay. So then let us know if you want to help us think about how to put together a good meeting to kind of pull together what's been happening, particularly around the consent issue, to synthesize that at one of our last meetings of the year this year.
Precisely.
Okay. We were covering a lot of ground there, so I just wanted to get it focused.
Advanced level course here, people.
There you go.
So with that, unless there's other news or updates.
I got one quick thing, Daniel, if there's any
Yeah.
time for a couple items. Yeah, so we'll update on the Gravity Affinity group. I think next week more, but the company I work with, BitFocus, is one of the pilot participants, but our community member, Santa Cruz, had to drop out because they want to focus on integrations with their specific health information exchange and Medi-Cal. So I'll have to partner with somebody else. So Gravity's finding one. And then there's been some really interesting stuff going on in the W3C community recently. You know, the verified credentials, you know, which uses this decentralized IDs, not necessarily blockchain, but can use blockchain, you know, reached a recommendation status, which means it's a standard, you know, in W3C terms. And the other things I've noticed is that Solid Project, there's been a lot of us have been talking about Solid Project as a way of having the client managed consent. You know, that's a international, you know, large scale project being used by the EU and such. Anyway, there's been some work and some discussion of incorporating verified credentials into Solid Project. And so that's starting to knock at the door of a lot of the things we've been talking about with a consent framework. And then a third thing I've seen that's very interesting is that kind of tying into all our ontology work is that, you know, there's a company called Communica, which makes an open source adapter. It's on GitHub. I could send a link to it, but it's actually a Sparkle engine that runs right against Solid. And it also uses GraphQL linked data as an alternative to Sparkle, which is super cool because that's, you know, GraphQL is preferred by web developers. And we're talking about tools that are mainstream now, not obscure tools like Sparkle. So really interesting stuff, almost like a convergence with our consent utility service. And I mean, even Tim Berners-Lee is like talking about some of these topics. Well, I mean, he started Solid, so it's no surprise, but you know, he's abstracting the web ID from an actual like profile. So there's a zero knowledge proof of identity using verified credentials. So I don't know, pretty interesting developments in the tech world, just the general tech world, along the lines of what we've been talking about in consent. So I'm wondering, how do we dovetail with these more mainstream efforts? Just I know people like Jim, Matt, and Brian are following this, but
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot going on.
So, Eric, is Solid? Do they have like a bunch of production level projects like ongoing that are like, you know, actually in use right now?
Yeah. I know the Flanders city government has a full like implementation, but I would just check the Inrupt site. You know, that's the actual company that Tim Berners has partnered with to deliver it. But yeah, they have a lot of traction already.
So,
but you know, they have a lot to do.
One of the questions I'd have for the lawyers about, especially, is so zero. Just to clarify technical reference, the zero knowledge proof is basically a way of me being able to prove something without giving you that information. So I can prove that I'm older than the age of 21 without giving you my actual date of birth.
That's great.
Right?
I'm glad you're.
No, it'd be proving that you are who you say you are,
Right.
without any kind of personal questions, like websites actually often ask, like, what's your mother's
Right.
maiden name or something, or what actor is your favorite, or what's your favorite sport, you know, things that you've pre-told them. That'd be a knowledge proof. Whereas this is, they don't ask any questions. You either have the IDs or not. And,
Right.
and the idea behind the decentralization of it, which isn't something Solid has yet, you know, it's part of that W3C standard they're starting to incorporate and talk about, you know, with then, yeah, that verification could happen from many sources or pulling from many different.
So I just, the legal question I just had was, in what this is probably going to be a use case by use case specific of like, when do you actually need to actually provide data, and when will essentially an organization like just trust the math, trust the algorithm that this is the person, you know, that like I'm trusting this identity assertion because that's what the algorithm tells us. So that was all I was going to say about that. Sorry for, don't mean to derail you, Daniel.
No, this is super. And in fact, this is great, Eric. I think that's part of the idea of the synthesis meeting and the longer term meeting, because, you know, we built the scan in 4 categories. One was technology, one was legal, one was governance, and one was equity. So those actually represent 4 tracks or 4 separate conferences, right? A deep dive. Each of those deserve a deep dive. And the technical pieces, which is what's so, you know, what we want to get to, right? We're like chomping at the bit here in places just to get it going, to actually put some of that stuff into play, is the purpose of the synthesis. It's not just an academic exercise. Like, what do we know now on each of those 4 dimensions that we can actually use state of the, you know, it's like just in time kind of, you know, sort of architecture and implementation to prove it out just so we can move along. And now that, you know, Amit last week said, you know, let's get a place at HIMSS, the showcase to do this. So we'll be right in the belly of the bit. We could show that, you know, the concept right there. That's a great place to think about, you know, sort of bringing that kind of thinking to the table.
But yeah, one of the questions, well, Jim and I posed on a Solid forum, or, you know, I can't remember if it was a GitHub site for Solid, the issue tracker, you know, how are workflows incorporated into Solid? Ultimately, it's a way for people to control their data and then allow that data to be reused. It started off, you know, from the genesis of like social media, controlling your social media data, and then allowing these companies like Facebook and Google to access it, you know. But then how do we have something like the XACML kind of workflow? Can we embed XACML into a Solid workflow? You know, how do we bring these things, you know, together? And then how can you have an agent, like what Matt was alluding to, an agency holding your data, and then that workflow is applied, and, you know, your verified credentials then inform what they can and can't do. So yeah, there's so much to do, but, you know, it'd be nice if we're all on common frameworks that are sort of overlapping, you know, in major ways.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's great. The one thought I had before we now move to Eliel here is that, you know, as we're thinking about, you know, what is the utility about, right? I keep going back to the San Diego sort of birthday cake, inverted birthday cake model, right? Where the bottom 2 layers are more administrative data. So the risk is way lower, different 2 levels of access. Everybody has access to demographic data. Administrative stuff, you need more people involved with it, but it's that top level that is like super important, that not everybody, very few people need to see that. And so we need to engineer it so that we can not spend all the same kind of critical resources for the top 5% or, you know, 10% as the bottom 90%, right? Because it's a different requirement. I think we get that, you know, they say the perfect is the enemy of the good here. And so I think segmenting our approaches is also useful, which it sounds like you can apply that kind of identity management in some situations. It's probably a game changer, so to speak. So with that, let's see how the game is being changed in Texas.
Yeah, so, you know, I want to welcome Eliel, who was with us about 10 months ago. We're very glad to have you back today and to get some updates on your project, which is at least 2 projects, if not probably 5, 6, or 7 projects. And I'm sure you'll fill us in on that. But at least in terms of the technology, as I understand it, you know, you're marrying together a couple of very important pieces of technology to form something that is unique. So we're very excited to hear about that. And as you gathered from the conversation that you've just been hearing, there's a lot of interest in the issue of consent, which is what this group has been focused on. And so I hope that as you present your material today, that one of the things that you can maybe walk us through is, you know, you're starting with your FIRED app, which is essentially a 21st century cures solution, right? So that you and I can get access to our own data and share that data as we see fit. To me, that is an opening then, right? We're making active choices about the sharing of our data. So what's the next step to jump, you know, from that to the issue of consent around sharing the social data, and not just the medical data with the social, but the social data with the medical folks, et cetera. So I hope that you'll be able to kind of walk us through your thinking and what's in the architecture of the solutions about that. And then the second, you know, sort of question that I wanted to pose even before you get started, but we can come back to it at the end, is, you know, the connection between some of these ONC LEAP funded projects and, you know, to what extent that's happening, and what kind of a community has sort of been made or not been made for all of you to work together. And I'm thinking about that, again, in the context of consent, with the consent decision service that was created out in San Diego using the LEAP funding stream. And then more recently, some of us saw a presentation of the ELTSS work done in Missouri with the LEAP funding, and that capacity to kind of build an enhanced care plan using the LTSS framework, which again, as we sort of move to, you know, beyond simply closing the loop on a referral, but having more vigorous exchange of information and consolidated care planning, being able to pull together a meaningful plan of care that is shared across a variety of partners, including the people that it is affecting, you know, is really important as well. So just wanted to, you know, frame it with a couple of things that we've been thinking about as part of this group. And we're very excited to hear where you're at this point. So I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Christine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I thank you all for inviting me back, and happy to share where we are. And the project is still ongoing. Next month we should be going live and then collecting some real data at that point. Before I jump in, I want to address your second question first, Christine, because the first one I can address as I speak of the different pieces and parts of our project. But in terms of collaboration across LEAP RDs, I think that there is some, but you know, maybe not enough. But some of the reasons might be also because if you look at the list of LEAP projects, they kind of differ quite a bit. You know, on the goal and the scope. I think maybe the first time I saw.
Yeah, Bella texted me with more pictures because somebody
Jim,
opened the whole back
you want
up.
to mute yourself?
I think the first time I saw one, you know, LEAP NOFO, as they say, was recently. That aligns well, right? So we have this the award in 2021 that I'm going to be describing and talking about. And I think just this year, another one asking for a closed loop referral system. So that one is really talking about pretty much the same kind of ask, but the other ones will be very different, right? There's something about AI and research and social determinants of health and a patient engagement platform. So now, I'm not saying that they can't come together, but it's not so simple. And we have like presented together at different conferences, and we know each other, and we try to collaborate. We talk to the folks in San Diego and the current RDs as well. But I don't know of any major, collaboration that has taken place across LEAP RDs that led to something that can be, talked about. So I hope that helps a little bit with that initial question.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen and make these very informal. Anyone can jump on and ask any questions. I think you may have a copy of this already. But you're correct, Christine, that this is us basically bringing pieces and parts that we have been building in different projects with the same goal of optimizing referrals and more precisely closing the loop, as everybody uses that term. But we feel that we have lots of missing pieces of information and systems that don't allow for us to visually see what is going on fully from end to end when a referral is placed. And I say that because one of the projects that I'm going to talk about as part of this is called SHIP, the Social and Health Information Platform. And we collect quite a bit of data that when we look at it, we see in our community that of all the referrals that are placed, 30% or so of them are closed successfully. About 10, 20 not closed, and we know that that one is not going to be closed, meaning the person is not eligible, or for whatever reason, we already know that they're not going to receive that service. But the other 60 and plus, we have no idea what happens. They stay hanging there and don't get to the finish line one way or the other. And it's just, in our view, because there is not enough granularity on the referral systems that are tracking this. So our hope is that because we are trying to do this project with APIs and standard APIs, that we'll be able to know more as we watch everything that takes place through the referral platform. So what we were saying here was to RNC is that, we wanted to maybe use the social health information platform that we already had in place and utilizing FHIR resources, making it, standard based with that title. I'll move to the next slide here. This is the group collaborating with us. So we do have 3 HIEs involved. So here in Texas, in Central Texas, Integrated Care Collaboration, or ICC, which has been renamed to Connexus, is the HIE that we're going to collaborate in Austin. And then we're collaborating with our local mental health authority called Integral Care that covers a large area in our community, and People's Community Clinic, which is one of our FQHCs. And initially, we had proposed a few community-based organizations, but after working with the clinical providers, we determined that the best use case for them was food insecurity. And the Central Texas Food Bank would be the best, CBO to collaborate with, because that's where most of their referrals go to. So we brought in the food bank to collaborate with us. They serve 21 counties in Central Texas, so it's a pretty massive operation, honestly. And so that work is going well with them. We also then collaborating with the referral management systems, right? Find Help and Unite Us with the idea of that they would serve this ecosystem as well. And the EMI advisors, which, as you all know, is the folks managing the Gravity projects, as you're going to have Emily coming here and present next, also part of our project and provide some guidance. But everything we build, we're going to try to make sure that it's replicable in other places. So that's why the Greater New Orleans Health Information Exchange and El Paso HIE are here. Because literally, we're going to give them the code, the systems, direction, details, documentation, and help them deploy in their environments and make sure that it works with synthetic data. In Austin, we're going to run these in a real pilot in real settings with patients that are being consented in a research study, and watch the close of that loop across those patients and across the organizations. But in Louisiana and El Paso, it's just going to be synthetic, done in a closed environment. Those are the aims. I think I may have shared these with you before. I think I presented on these before, but I don't remember. It's been 10 months. I can't remember what happened last week. The goals that we proposed, the aims that we proposed to ONC was first to put together that FHIR-based closed loop referral system, in collaborating with clinical providers and put these in real settings. The second goal was to take the use case package from the Gravity and test that out. And if you have read that document, you know that there are specific actors and tools that need to exist for the FHIR resources to be, exchanged across patients and providers and CBOs and so on and so forth, electronic medical record systems for screening, diagnosis, planning, and intervention. So we are following that as the model here. And the third aim is what I just mentioned, is that we're going to share the systems with all the HIEs to see if they can deploy. One key aspect I mentioned that we make sure that's always part of our project is the engagement with the communities that are going to be affected. So once we identify what was going to be the use case, we then reach out to the communities here, Asian, Latinos, African Americans, and others, to bring them in a ongoing discussion. This is not a focus group. It's like they become part of the project with us to guide the direction of the development. And this was the architecture that we came up with, right? That the idea is that everybody was a FHIR endpoint. FHIR chip would basically be the tool that allows data to be visible to each one of these organizations, right? So you're gonna hear what chip is about. You're gonna hear a little more about what FHIR is, and if we have the HIEs and the referral systems like Find Help and UNIFY, also with FHIR APIs, would be able to see everybody communicating in real time through the platform. But here's what happened: 6 months or 8 months in the project, after extensive discussions with Find Help, which right here in our backyard in Austin, and with UNIFY as well, we just realized that they are working towards standards, but they do not have them ready. And not only that, we wouldn't be able to even call APIs that were not FHIR APIs yet with them. Like we just said, well, if you have APIs for referrals, for assessment results, can we tap into those? And the answer was, it wasn't ready. So what we then decided was, okay, we still wanted to demonstrate this. And then when you guys are ready, we can build in such a way that any referral system could be connected to the FHIR chip platform and still allow the platform to be able to see the details that are coming out of the referral systems. So that's where we are building a referral module that's going to be part of the platform, but again, using standards that would allow these other referral systems to be plugged in when they're ready. And I'll just highlight here that I haven't mentioned it yet, but we selected the food bank, and the use case that we're going to be trying to resolve or address is the referrals of the SNAP program, right, for the with Medicaid here in Texas. So keep that in mind as well. This is the timeline of where we are. The project ends in August next year. Our IRB is in the final steps to be completed, and the reason for that is because if you think about the project starting in last year, it takes quite a bit of work to determine what is the use case that we're going to address with with the providers that we had selected with the food bank, and elaborate on those details. And it's not only until a few months ago that we had very clear picture of what exactly we're going to solve and how, so that then protocol can be written, and then we can clarify legal and IRB of what exactly is going to be happening here and get the approvals necessary to include human subjects in the research. But that's in the final stages. I think by the end of the month it's going to be completed, which means the platform is mostly developed. It's going to go live in November in real settings, like I said, into clinical practices, recruiting patients. And then in December, we shared the code with the folks in Louisiana and El Paso, and they were going to try it out on the end. And hopefully by late next year, we start writing our reports back to NC and the learnings that we have achieved through the project. I'll pause here for a second to see if any questions, otherwise I'll keep going.
I had a
So,
question.
yeah, Daniel, if I can maybe frame your question. So it sounds, Eliel, like you have this very specific use case around food insecurity. And as you said, you've chosen the one partner in order to implement the full gravity use case package. And so at this point in time, to do this, you don't actually need to have a referral resource data bank because you're just making that one sort of singular type of transaction at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, because I know what Daniel's question was about, the existence of a robust 211, and I know from our discussions with our mutual colleague Susan Malaya that there's also conversations with the United Way of, I think, Central Texas and their 211 system as part of a future roadmap. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Susan and us collaborate closely. SHIP, in fact, is part of that model community work. So 211 is managed by United Way here in Austin. And, the eventual goal is to then integrate the efforts, which are ongoing and is complex. But I believe we have a robust 211, but that integration is not envisioned just yet. I think we envision on a use case by use case basis, just like we picked here the SNAP end to end, so that we can get that granularity that I was talking about to fully understand what is taking place. Not other ones that are on the pipeline that I can share is homelessness. I think, some of you know that we have a challenge with the growth in Austin and many individuals can't afford housing anymore. So homelessness it's a big problem here. The other one is, as we describe this process that, have seen some interest federally to solve weak workflows as well. I think we all know that how much value it provides to families and kids, but only about 50% of the eligible individuals actually get the service. So we are trying to understand what is happening there as well, but maybe building a workflow just as this. So the partnership is there with 211 and is growing. But again, we are trying to be very focused on each use case. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of other questions that have popped up in the chat. Are you able to take a look at it, or should I read them?
Yeah, if you can help me read, because I may have lost track.
Sure, yeah. So Rita asked how easy or hard it is to, quote, FireEyes all of the partners and endpoints.
Well, that's a good question. What I was going to demonstrate here is that we are not doing it. We're basically saying we're going to bring in the tools that are going to be Fire ready to, to work alongside what you have, envisioning the future, which would be that the endpoints actually have Fire. Meaning, when you hear about SHIP here, you're going to see that SHIP works alongside the EHR, but it's not the EHR. And we are not expecting the EHR to be ready at this point with Fire, especially gravity Fire endpoints, right? As you know, that's going to take a while to be there. But we are trying to pilot anyways with the tools that we put in place so that we can start informing knowledge of what needs to exist. What are the gaps that may exist? And I can talk about a few that we have already found. So that by the time that the endpoints are ready, we have already done some piloting and in real use world settings.
And then one last question. Oh, well, now another one popped up, but Matt had asked whether in your experience working with Find Help and Unite Us, whether they're using other APIs, non-fire APIs, or just not really using APIs at all at this point in time.
So they do have APIs, right? But they are internal within their systems, of course. They didn't have any APIs that could actually be exposed to us. They didn't have fire at all, but we even consider like, can we at least call the APIs for the referrals and the assessments, so that we can then ingest that data and on the fly transform that to fire, and of course lots of mapping, and build a fire server on our end that can then expose the fire APIs of referrals. But that, not even that was available at this point. So I think it's a work in progress. They may have, but again, not for to expose to a project like this.
Do you think that the 21st Century Cures Act information blocking provision is motivating these partner vendors to get on board with being able to exchange fire, referral data, for example?
I haven't seen yet. I think that may start happening when enforcement start getting more strict, right? I think
it's already in effect.
I know.
All electronic health information must be made available to receiving another organization that is trying to coordinate care with that. All EHI, not even just UCSDI. too. So that is as of for technology vendors. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm well aware. I sit on the high tech at ONC, and so I get to hear very much every day how it is live, right? The information blocking. But again, EHI, like you're saying, covers a lot more than just the the traditional clinical data. So I don't think any of these other external systems, except for EHRs, are considering that yet to be something that they're consider a actor. They may be, from what I understand as well. HIEs definitely, but I haven't seen any HIEs put together their solutions in place to be able to comply with information blocking. EHRs definitely, I think they know that they have to. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Matt, but I think that even if it was, when it comes to for SDOH, I don't think there's a lot of capture of the data related to SDOH inside of EHRs that would be exposed, that we could tap into to demonstrate something like this. That's the other aspect. Yeah, so they're not actors. I agree, Rita.
And I think maybe, Jim, your question is somewhat rhetorical in the context of this ONC funded project, which is fire focused. So versus
that's a good point, Christine. You're right.
The big picture of reality, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And probably one we can extrapolate on for other use cases or considerations, but if it's ONC, it's got to be fire.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we let you continue then?
Yes.
Well, I does have a question, and I would appreciate if that can be raised. There's been a couple of pop-ups in the chat around it. In terms of the HSDS, and that's the specification element, which you're saying is managed between fire and ship. So those are the standards that you are using, is that correct?
Yeah, so yeah,
within those standards, there appears to be the facility for personal IDs to be multiple.
What ID? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Right. You're working with personal identifying numbers, a single, you're looking for a unique ID, but it appears that depending on the role of the individual who is recorded or working through the system, that ID may be multiple. They may be captured multiple times per individual. And I was just wondering if you had ID management capacity within the solution that you're working with to ensure that there is a unique identifier for every individual.
I think there may be a misunderstanding here, and my apologies for interrupting this conversation, David.
I'm here to ask the daft laddie questions, Brian, so please enlighten me.
The thing is that HSDS, the Human Services Data Certification from the open referral, open effort, it is a specification for describing organizations, locations, and services that are provided by those organizations, such as you find here in the US through 211 directories. So it's really a directory service, a directory specification, not one that works with individual human beings. So very, very little is recorded in there about individual human beings where you might need person ID. And only in the context of, do you have a name and a telephone number or an email address for a contact person? So I think there's a misunderstanding here about the role that HSDS plays in what's going on down in Austin, in terms of being a standard by which one can look up what services are available from a community-based organization. And now I turn it back over.
I understand the differentiation. So that it appears that for this purpose, this is not a unique identifier per individual as an identifying feature, if you like, is not a necessary requirement. This is more about a service directory.
Apologies for interrupting. We're just deep in the process of testing out the human services to FHIR directory IG, the HL7 Human and Social Services Working Group. And so I happen to be unreasonably familiar with it at the moment.
Be as unreasonable as you like. I'm actually looking at them as we speak.
Yeah, so HSDS is going to fit here, right, on the referral model that we talked about. And again, it's just for one community-based organization and for one type of referral, for a SNAP referral. So that's what Christine asked earlier. So as far as the ID, David, I think I'll get to that when I talk a little bit about how the workflow was designed, and there is some management of IDs there and how people are onboarded in the project and consented that maybe help clarify that specific question.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will continue from here. So what this slide is trying to say here is that we already have the platform called FiredUp, which I think I talked to you about before. And we had another one called SHIP that was developed through other sources, through other funding within our community, funded by the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, that we basically proposed to UNC. We're going to bring these things together, and so that we can pilot in real settings what we are trying to do here. So recap here what FiredUp was basically patient engagement technology that we built as part of LIPA again in 2019 to 2021, that was intended to get patients access to their medical data, like the 21st Century Cures Act says, without much effort, and we tried to do that. And we did that again in collaboration with our community, and then using human-centered design approaches. The data is being accessed from the HIE as the aggregator in the region through FHIR resources. The individuals get that in a mobile app on their device that they then can consent other third-party applications to be able to access the data for one purpose or the other. And I'll mention a little bit of an example of that. So again, we recruited, 10 individuals from African Americans, Latinos, Spanish speakers, English speakers, Asians, and had community engagement studios for a year and a half. And those are 5 meetings per group to understand their views and perceptions and desires of such a platform and inform the development. The user design, center design looked at the details that coming out of CES, along with a competitive analysis, created scenarios, designed a low fidelity system that then was tested by the groups themselves, that then eventually led to the final design of the application, which is here, and the app is available on iOS and Google. If you're trying to download and log in, you're probably not going to get to. There is a way by which you get access to your data. Right now, it's just running our HIE here in Central Texas, but we are collaborating with 4 other HIEs, including, of course, the one in New Orleans and El Paso, but 2 others that are deploying Fired App to be able to then deliver data to their patients. I have a slide here with some of the results of the study itself, and I'll leave that to you. You have the article. I'm not going to deep dive too much here on that, and even some quotes from participants. But one thing that I would say is the related to the question that I think David maybe had is how someone get access to the app itself. And once that project was finished as a research project, where we recruited individuals to download and link to their data to the HIE and access their clinical data, and we learned the feedback from patients. Now we have received another fund from another foundation locally, from the St. David's Foundation, to deploy this in real clinical settings, meaning move out of the research umbrella. So it's not using a research consent anymore, and is deployed in one of our clinical providers, that if the patients come in, they can ask them, hey, you want to get access to your data through this mobile app? We can allow you to do that. And the way that happens is we have a plug to the EHR that the front desk person can, click, and that basically pushes a link to the individual's phone, email, or a text message. They download the app, but at that point, the computer screen of the recruiter basically is giving them a code that the patient that's sitting in front of them needs to enter in the device, meaning we are leveraging the identity validation that the clinical providers already do, right? You know that you go to a clinic, they're going to ask you for your driver's license, your proof of insurance, your form of payment, and they know you are who you say you are. So we leveraging that step to basically activate the app. So when the patient enters the code that's provided by the front desk person, they actually, now we are basically on the back end linking them to their data with the HIE, and all the data that the HIE has is delivered to them, in the mobile app. So I think that is explaining, good. That's explaining the point that David was asking. And then David, I'll elaborate a little more when I get to how these get looped in with the other apps that are involved in the whole project. So the other app that I was talking about is SHIP, right? So we have been building SHIP for the last 4 years or so, with the idea of being a clinical decision support tool that integrates data from many sources and deliver that data alongside the EHR, not in the EHR, and I want to be specific about that, but alongside the EHR, for a few reasons. One is we do not believe that it's humanly possible to put every type of data in an EHR. And second, because of the variety of EHR vendors that are out there. And SDOH data can be very complex to assume that we are always going to pipe everything to a EHR. So SHIP is to aid clinicians with additional information related to social services that can help them care for their patients. So back-end data aggregation, and then clinical decision support tool that's on the workstations of the clinical providers. And this is in real settings, right? So it's not just a screenshot here. I can't show you the real screenshot or the real demo because I'll need a EHR and a few other things, but it is deployed in our clinics, in our FQCs here in Austin. So by just going about their day and open the EHR and open the patient record that's sitting in front of them, kicks off the process of us getting details that basically say this doctor is looking at this patient record right now. And that allows us to deliver notification at the workstation level, as you can see here on the corner, saying, hey, this patient has consented and has some visualization available related to their SDOH needs. When they click on that, notification, then we open up SHIP. And in this case here, it was the initial project that led to SHIP development was for treatment of pediatric asthma patients in our clinics. And what we were doing here was we were aggregating data from EPA sensors across Central Texas, from weather.com, from a home assessment that was done for the patients that will determine if they have mold in the house or old mattress, or if they have roaches or other pests, meaning all the pieces of information that our researchers at UT, pediatric asthma researchers will tell us that were important to determine what is causing the asthma attacks in a specific kid, right? So the clinician then can look at this dashboard and see, okay, this is where this kid lives, where they go to school. Here are the data points that are coming in, and I can see here, green, orange, and red. What are the points that could be a cause of their asthma? And it might be that they just need a mattress replacement as opposed to medication. But I go back to the point that I was trying to make earlier, is that how would we integrate all these pieces of data inside of a EHR? And to all EHRs, that would become quite cumbersome. And I can hear from you thinking, okay, Smart on Fire can do that. But our FQHCs do not use EHRs that are Smart on Fire capable. And that may still take a long time. So that's the vision that we had to build SHIP, the integration in clinical settings. I'm not going to go into the details here. These are several visuals here on how SHIPs also help the community health workers and the clinics better manage the SDOH. This is a work list that shows who has to fill a needs assessment, who has filled but have not been referred to anything yet, who has been referred but haven't closed yet, that you have to follow up. So this is just helping the community health worker deals with the income, the individuals that are in the clinic today that they're working with. This one is simplifying which needs a specific individual has, and if they click in one of those lines, they can see where those needs assessments were completed, because it can be completed in different places across the community. They love this. This seems simplistic, right? But they love this compared to the fact that when they use a referral system, they may have to have 5, 6 different tabs to be able to understand what's going on with the different assessments, even with Find Help itself. And this is another one that is not showing real data, but that summarizes across clinics and what are the needs that are coming in and what are the referrals that need to be done. But I hope that's making a point that there's several other visuals that SHIP delivers to the clinics to be able to make informed decisions about SDOH. So going back to this diagram here, what we'll propose to MC was, okay, we have SHIP in the clinical settings, right? SHIP being just the tool that we built early on. And we have Fired Up that we can give to the patients themselves. And if we had the referral systems delivering APIs and the HIE, we could make these all work. Since the EHRs are not going to be ready yet with Gravity Fire APIs, neither the food bank is going to have a EHR to start with. We can place SHIP as a Fire-based tool in each one of these locations. The patient would have Fired Up, and at the beginning, I guess we were putting here, it could be one or the other, but now we know that this is going to use Fired Up and this is going to use Fired SHIP. But now we have an ecosystem where everybody's talking, RESTful APIs that we can communicate in real time. And so with that said, again, the use case for Snap referrals using Fired SHIP would then is what I'll cover quickly here in the next 2 slides. So currently, and this is a slide that I took from the presentation in the Affinity work group. We are one of the pilot in a Gravity Affinity work group. You could see that presentation there as well. But the point here is this is how this happens today, right? So you come to the clinic as a patient for SNAP referrals. The community health worker is going to talk to you and they're going to fill up your needs assessment inside of Find Help, right? They're going to ask you questions and fill up and then find out, okay, this person needs food assistance. The patient doesn't have access to the assessment themselves. You're just answering questions. Then the next step of that process is that the community health worker, now that determined that you have a need for SNAP, they place the referral and send that through Find Help, to the food bank. The patient doesn't necessarily get notified that referral took place, but they may get, a phone number or email to contact the food bank. But literally what happens is the food bank reaches out to the patient directly by email, by phone, to then, have the first contact with them. The first thing that they do is they want to make sure that this person actually is going to qualify to SNAP. So they have some pre-screening questions that they ask the patient over the phone, or if they show up in person. Are you a US citizen? Do you have these documents that are going to be necessary? Does anyone else in your family currently receive SNAP, benefits? Those 5 or 6 questions are going to tell the staff at the food bank that this individual can proceed or not, and qualify for the SNAP program. If they pass, then the food bank is going to, schedule an appointment to meet in person or remotely with the individual to actually complete the application for SNAP with them. And I think this is a standard practice that the staff of the food bank are well qualified, they're trained to be able to do these applications well. The patients show up to the meeting, they bring the documents necessary, they complete the application together, and then it's submitted to HHSC here in Texas, or Medicaid. The patient then gets reassessed again, because the food bank also wants to help the patient with other things, but the food bank doesn't have access to the assessment that was done in Find Help because they do not have a license to Find Help. So they basically have to ask the patients all the questions, assessment questions again, which each organization have a different assessment, which is another problem. And the questions are different, even though the answers mean the same thing. So there's a lot of mapping going on across assessments within our community. But they assess the patient again and then provide them with some other referrals at that point. The next step is that the food bank does not know from HHSC if the patient actually received the SNAP benefits or not. There's no way to do that electronically. But they do know that about 45 or 6 days, the patient is going to get a real letter on the mail saying that they were approved or declined. And so there is a missing piece of communication there between the patient and the food bank as well to know that that process was successful or not. So with that said, and understanding that challenge, those challenges, that way how we design the workflow to solve this. So if you show up in a clinic today as a patient and gets recruited to our project, you're going to be asked to download and install Fired Up like I described earlier. Somebody's going to click on the EHR to Fired Ship or Ship like I was describing, and that's going to send a link to the mobile device, to your phone number, and you will download the app. The recruiter is going to have a code that you're going to have to enter to match you to your records. Now, David, to your question earlier, we do not use the medical record number because we didn't want that record to come to our ecosystem. So a new ID is created that's crosswalk to the medical record number. And that ID is what's going to be used in this workflow. So the food bank is going to know the ID. The Fire Ship on the clinical side is going to know the Fire Ship ID, but it's not the medical record number that we're using. It got created when the patient was recruited. And as soon as the patient finished installing Fired Up, the next thing is they are asked to install the plugin for Fired Ship. And you have to understand that Fired Up came from the concept that Fired Up is only delivering your data, it does nothing else. And the goal is that it allows developers to create plugins that then bring the functionality to Fired Up. So the functionality here is that you are part of this study. So you download a plugin to FireShip, you get consented to be in the study. And the first thing after the consent is that you get the needs assessment on the mobile device. So you, as a patient, answer the questions that, the questions of the assessment that organization asks. And once you complete the assessment and you submit in your mobile device, the community health worker in the clinical settings that started the recruitment with you, basically it's going to get that pop-up on the screen saying, you got a new assessment completed by a patient. And the reason that we did that is because needs change. They don't get created when you're in a clinic setting, right? So I may have a home today, but tomorrow I may be evicted, and I would love to inform whoever can help me. So the patient could at some point make a change to their needs assessment, in a mobile device, and the clinical provider get that pop-up or get a notification in FireChip saying that there's something here for you to look at. But they review the needs assessment and say, hey, this person needs SNAP referrals. So I'm going to place that referral to the food bank, and the food bank would have FireChip running as well, would get that same notification that there's a new referral that came in, and they need to accept. Now, the Central Texas Food Bank, as I mentioned, is pretty large. They probably can take all referrals you send to them, but that's not the case for most CBOs. They have limited resources. So we wanted them to have that step to accept the referral. When they do accept the referral, automatically the ecosystem is going to send the eligibility questions to the patient mobile device. Are you a US citizen? Do you have these documents? And so on and so forth. The same things I said. The patient will answer those questions. And when they submit the answers, the food bank is going to get another notification saying, you got the answers here. They review, make sure that the patient actually is eligible to complete the process. And if they are, they pass them to the next step, which automates the next step as well. So the patient gets a request to upload on a mobile device, take pictures of their documents and upload to the ecosystem. And the other thing that they are requested to do is to pick a date and time. And when they are looking at the calendar, they're really looking at the calendar of the person that's going to help them at the food bank. So when they pick that spot, if they need a translator, the spot's going to be 2 hours. If they don't need a translator, it's going to be an hour. They can say if it's going to be in person or remote. But when they pick that calendar, it gets submitted to the Outlook of that recruiter, the person that's going to help them. And the meeting now is scheduled, and the documents possibly will be uploaded. But you can imagine now that from the clinical provider's perspective, that if they have 100 referrals for SNAP, we can now be able to see that who is in what step of the process. Are people falling off these referrals of SNAP because they are not US citizen, or because they didn't have the documents to actually complete the application, or what's going on? In the final step, we do even text the patients within 45 days and say, have you received a letter from HHSC? Because we wouldn't have the time to integrate this with the Medicaid yet. So we're just asking the patients, did you get a letter? If the answer is yes, can you take a picture and upload to the system? So that the food bank can see, if you're declined, why would you decline? And they can allow you to set up another meeting to maybe correct your application and get you to the finish line. But this is what I meant early on of how we are trying to see granularly what is going on throughout the workflow to be able to address these use cases, the 60% plus that are basically sitting there that we place referrals and we don't know what happens to them. This is the last slide I have, and I'm sure you have tons of questions.
Yeah, you have a pretty wrapped group. So there are a lot of questions in the chat. So we could maybe take the slides down if everybody's grabbed your email really quick, and then let's see, I'm trying to figure out where the most recent group of questions start. So I think probably around Ken Lord's question at 5:02. Are you able to see the chat, Eliel?
Yeah, I'm trying to see where.
So if you scroll up to 5:02 to Ken Lord's question about the software.
I can just say it if it makes it easier. So first of all, thank you very much. That was really good. I appreciate that. And so I have two questions that are more on the technical side. So is the software and the solutions that you developed, are they in open source? What's that stack look like? And I'm not sure I understood where, I think it was UNIFY or 211 directory fit within your architecture. So I had two questions and I'll try to lump those both together.
Yeah, so we have been having this discussion, including with Jim here, our colleague at the Linux Foundation, about open source or not, and with UT itself, because UT, does have a say on releasing something as open source or not. I think, as you can see here, it's still even in test, like we haven't even gone live yet. But I can tell you on Fired Up, the earlier one, that I think that's heading in the direction where any HIE that would like to deploy Fired Up, they would have access to that code at no cost. Of course, they may need some help to deploy it, but then they can at that point start providing data to patients directly through Fired Up. I can expect that maybe some of that mixed model is going to happen also to FireChip, but again, it may take a few years until we understand what fully happens here, and there could be other directions that they go. So at this point, Ken, probably can't even say if it is going to be open source or not.
Understand.
UT decision, yeah. The other question you had, if that answered your question.
Just a real simple one, just along, is it, what language did you use to deploy it in? Are you Java, .NET, something else?
Yeah, there's a lot of JavaScript, in our platform. Sorry about that. Yes, lots of JavaScript. I'd be happy to share the specs.
Okay. That's great. That's all.
Okay.
And the other one is, how does the social service directory fit within your architecture? Because I couldn't rationalize that.
Yeah. Yes, and you're talking about 211 again, right?
Right. So again, there's the pilot, and then there's the future, right? So the pilot, you didn't use a directory because you went directly to the food bank and their capacity to do SNAP.
Okay, so I missed all of that. So then maybe it's the future. Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah.
And how do you see that? Do you see you moving in that direction to sort of a service directory that then from an architectural perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I think there's a strong push from ONC with the referral management systems to follow these standards. It's understandable that they are not ready, but I think that push is there, and I've been in other discussions with both Unite Us and Find Help and ONC and other hearings where that has come up. So I think that'll come. Whether they are going to adopt HSDS is a different story. I hope, but we have been building thinking on that front that we'll try to align with open referrals standards so that it's flexible to whoever also adopt those standards. But
thank you.
That's the vision.
Rita, do you want to ask your question about aggregating data sources on social risk?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, first one of the slides had an image where you had the EHR and the other screen kind of superimposed.
I can't hear.
Yeah, Rita, unfortunately, actually, you're not coming across clearly.
I'm sorry. With
No, it's getting worse. So, I mean, you have your question in the chat. So I think, at this point, again, in your pilot project, Eliel, you talked about the very specific assessment that was going to be done by the community health worker, sort of that first level, and then there's the additional questions that come for the SNAP application. In that sort of larger concept of SHIP, is there assessments coming in from multiple sources that will be reconciled? You did mention the mapping of the assessments in your community, that there's a lot of people asking the same questions, maybe asking them a little bit differently, but getting to the same answer. So what's that vision about being able to kind of reconcile that and pull in assessment data from multiple sources?
So I think it's important to highlight how these projects are working in different timelines, right? Even though we are bringing them all together into fired ship, what we call in fired ship here, but ship itself has been already going on for a few years now. It's in real settings, and we have a few steps that have been already successfully accomplished. And one of them is that collection of the assessments that are happening with at least the 3 providers, organizations that we have integrated. But again, one of them use Prepare, another one, and the other 2 use local, their own developed assessment. And we have to basically manually map that across to kind of summarize what you saw in one screenshot. And again, when we started with SHIP, we are trying to map this with what we had right at the time. And I was on the Gravity project since 2019, and we are not ready to use anything from Gravity yet. So we just brute force, I guess, the mapping across. So now that Gravity has some of it, we are doing the analysis of like, is it possible for us to map the assessments that we have from these 3 or 4 providers to come up with a fully understand that when someone asks this question is the same question as this other one, and what it should be the answer that then we store in our ecosystem. So we have a few people just doing exactly that work, and it's pretty extensive, to be honest. Because again, the assessments looking at things in a completely different way. Like, I'll give you an example. In one of our providers, they have the heading in the assessment about money, right? So you think that the questions are going to be about money specifically, but then a sub question within that category is about SNAP. Do you need SNAP? And I don't know how they connected the 2, but I guess if you can't afford food, that's a money problem. But somebody else's assessment is completely categorized, completely different on the food insecurity. You have food challenges, right? So I hope that helped a little bit with the assessment aspect of like, it's a work in progress. But I want to go back to your initial question, Christine, which was on consent. And there is a lot of pieces here related to consent as well. So when we talk about Fired App in itself, the concept of consent that we have in Fired App is that you get your data and somebody else can build a plugin in Fired App that's going to ask you for your permission for some data access. The example we used to pilot that was with Find Help. And what we did, we integrated Find Help to as a plugin to Fired App. And Find Help would have to be installed by the patient, that plugin. When the patient installed the plugin, Find Help asks, hey, I'd love to get access to your zip code and your diagnosis. And if you provide me access with those pieces of information, I don't need to know who you are, but if I can get the API access to your conditions, to that diagnosis and your zip code, I can give you a map of social services around you that fit your medical conditions. And that's exactly what we did. And then if the patient at some point say, I don't want to Find Help to see my zip code anymore, where I live, they can turn off that access, right? They can uninstall the plugin. But what we did as well was that within a month, we just like Apple devices, we put a little pop-up on the app saying, hey, Find Help has been looking at your diagnosis and zip code for the last month. Do you still want them to access or not? And the patient can say no. Then we follow up within 3 months again, and then 6 months, and then we stop asking if they continue to say yes. But it's all up to the patient to decide what plugins they want to install and what access they want to give to each plugin that's been created.
And what about the agencies that have the Fired Ship platform? Because in your diagram, I think you showed 3 agencies having the whole platform. So is there controls amongst them as well?
Yeah, so in the case of, so I was describing just the Fired App itself, right? Its own solution. In terms of SHIP, which, like I said, is a project that has been going on for some time now, it's a research project still inside of UT, meaning patients that are consented into SHIP, they are consented in a research project, and they're giving the medical school the authority to use their data to create those dashboards and inform their clinicians. We are actually in the process now of moving SHIP outside of the umbrella of an IRB and be deployed into our HIE to be used by the clinical providers under TPO. And as you can imagine, that's going to change things a little bit. That the TPO allow the data that's being brought in from social services into the HIE to be connected to the clinical data. Now they become part of the record of the patient and can be used by covered entities. But the opposite does not happen. The CBO that provided the data to the HIE may not have access under TPO, as you know. But what can happen is that's why considering as a community is what we call model community consent, where it's similar to a consent to a HIE, that once the patient consents to say, I would like to have the housing authority to know my homelessness situation so they can help me find a location. And then, or another use case, right? So we eventually build that as to be use case specific, that then SHIP becomes that role-based access that I described, where if you are at the food bank and the person has consented that the food bank can see some piece of information, they'll be able to see. If you are a homelessness person that allow our homeless coalition to be able to see your details from HMIS, you'll be able to see. So that process is in transition. And in terms of fire chip, again, that's a different consent as well. It's a research consent in a research project. It's a very limited number of people, about 50 people per clinical provider, so 100 total under IIB. And yes, when you sign that consent, you sign the consent first to download Fired Up and to be part of the study. I mean, to download Fired Up and get your data from the HIE. And then when you install the plugin for Fired Chip inside of Fired Up, you sign another consent to authorize you to be part of the Fired Chip project research. So there's a lot of consent going on here, and I hope that made a little bit of sense.
I have one more follow-on question to that, which is if the source of the data coming into well, either system, quite honestly, itself requires consent to release that data. Say it's a school, right? And then there has to be a FERPA consent to get that data out of the school. Where is that? How is that handled?
Excellent question. So the way that SHIP was designed, when we envisioned the visuals, the visualizations that you saw, we are talking about getting all the data from the HIE transferred to the medical school, and all the data that Find Help has about anybody that's partner, that has provided, received service from any of our clinics participating, also moved to the medical school. So we did that by using limited data sets, right? We don't know the identity of the individuals. And I just presented with DataVent earlier today. So we use DataVent as the tool that use privacy preserving record linkage tokenization to be able to link the individuals from the HIE with the data from Find Help. And then we have that stage. As the medical school, we are able to do population health analysis or research with that data that has been linked as a limited data set, but we can't not re-identify anybody. Now, the SHIP application within the clinical settings that I mentioned, that you have a notification and someone clicks on it, that's what allows re-identification to take place in real time by a provider. So the data has already been linked on the back end by SHIP through PPRL. And when you get a notification, you click on it, SHIP knows which patient the clinician is looking at, and knows as well the two sources from Find Help and the HIE, and is able to combine and put those dashboards together. So the consent there was for that re-identification is not necessary because the provider has that right because it's their patient. But for the linkage, we required a consent, right? So when the patient comes in, at least right now, because SHIP is still a research project, when they come in and the community health worker wants to use SHIP to help them, they ask the patient. And in fact, SHIP has a little solution where the community health worker can type their phone number or email the patient, and they get that text message or email real time, and they can sign read the consent on their mobile device and sign the consent, and the consent submitted back to SHIP. And at that point, the linkage of the clinical data and the referral data is takes place and the clinician can see that. We still don't store the PHI ourselves within UT. Is that confuse or help, Christine?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives me a good sort of big picture. I'm still not quite sure in some of those situations where the sort, like say, again, if the source of the data that the child had food insecurity was their school, how
Yeah.
that's being solved in the first place.
Well, let me give you another example that may help there. So I just mentioned the referral data and the HIE data, right? But another use case here, yes, we have the school district data that's being shared through Find Help, right? The school district authorized that. Now, because it's coming in a de-identified way, we don't know who those individuals are. But because the agreements between Find Help, the school district and the clinics, when they do that re-identification, they can see the data that came from the school district. So it's being stored. We don't know who the individuals are and re-identified when needed.
Great, thank you.
And I'll highlight that's not an answer for everything, right? SDOH data is very complex. We are trying to work with our jail system to help our homeless individuals before they are released from jail. And that brings another regulatory aspect that we haven't even touched on. So this is very complex stuff, but PPRL is definitely a way to go about connecting data, analyzing data across a community without infringing anyone's privacy.
So there's a lot going on in the chat. Does anyone want to jump in with a question from out of there?
I lost track of.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, Eliel, if I could ask, and you and I can discuss this separately, do you have plans or thoughts about how MediLinker could be plugged into the framework in the future?
Yeah, so MediLinker, for the folks that don't know here, or maybe you do know, is about blockchain identity sharing, like I think Eric was talking about earlier. So I think we have envisioned that, Jim, at some point that MediLinker and FiredUp could become one. Once MediLinker becomes validated and ready, we have been working on FiredUp in terms of bringing data from Fire APIs into that ecosystem. So I can see the marriage of the two could happen someday. But I don't know when that day would be necessarily.
Excellent, thanks.
And Jim, does that go back to resolving some of those earlier questions from David about the ID management?
It could, and I certainly don't want to expound upon it here, but be happy to discuss. MediLinker is based on some of the Linux Foundation open source identity management, decentralized identity management platforms. I was very excited about the work that UT did because it's building upon other things that other companies and organizations have done, and the ability to use what are called W3C verifiable credentials in MediLinker to tie into a record, and then other open source components like Cardia and what we've discussed in other meetings there can build in consent around the data that's included with it, either as a Fire object or as part of the credential.
So with respect to the other stuff that's going on in chat, Brian and I were just clarifying that because you had mentioned that all these organizations or vendors or technology companies are not ready for fire or gravity, and so Brian was just pointing out that Open City Labs, Administration for Children and Families, which is kind of the owner of Operational Data Hub, and May June all work together in that connectathon to demo the fire standard, the gravity fire standards and the national directory standards. So and we'd welcome any opportunities to help out in Texas if there's areas for collaboration. So
yeah, Thanks, Matt, for pointing that out. I'm having a hard time following the chat at this point, so I did download a copy of the chat. To click. I'm going to read it later, and yeah, would love to collaborate if there are places to do so.
Yeah, we'll follow up after.
There's one question Rita has that's referencing Shelley's question. New patient IDs. Organization. Is you who's acting as sort of the hub, I think is the question.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what you think?
I'm sorry.
So, Eliel, you said you assign a number, from,
Yeah.
but yeah, what's the?
Where does that sit?
Yeah, where does it sit? Who owns it? If you're going to expand, this whole model nationally, if that were to be the case, like, this problem has occurred for decades, right? Either having a unique universal ID. But if we were able to have that and link it to a patient, a lot of the things that we're having to do today could be alleviated. For example, the assessments. You're asking the same questions multiple times from the patient for different organizations. I mean, but if you had sort of a database that had those questions answered, connected to that ID, it would alleviate a lot of the inefficiencies.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what we have been trying to do here is kind of leverage what we have, right? So in the case of this pilot, the fact that we have two providers that are members of the HIE, and the HIE has its EMPI already in place, that's well established, has been going on for 20 years, right? Then we have the entry points of the clinics that are identifying who the patients are and what is their medical record number, that the HIE has an ID for that patient across the community, across the hospitals and providers. So we leverage that crosswalk of IDs that the HIE already have. But as part of the research project, we didn't want to bring the medical record number within our platform to not infringe any issues. So that's where we created this additional ID. The crosswalk stays within the HIE. So the HIE is the only one that knows. And in fact, we don't know anything because the whole platform is housed at the HIE. But we purposefully designed that process, keeping in mind that could be that is housed elsewhere, not in the HIE itself. But the HIE hosts the whole platform, and the HIE keeps that crosswalk between fired ship ID and the medical record number or the community ID of the patients. So we are leveraging, I guess, the entry point that the patients are coming into the clinic. They're validated by the clinics of who they are because they have the IDs. And because the HIE has an EMPI that's using the medical record number that comes from the clinics, we leverage all that ecosystem to be able to do this. So in terms of scaling this elsewhere, I think we've faced with the same problem that we have always had, right? So if you want to then find out who this person is in another HIE, there's no way to do so, as you all know. So unless if we get to a national ID or some other way to validate someone's identity in another region, in another HIE, there's no way to crosswalk someone with 100% precision, right? The EMPIs can do that, but we haven't really solved that across HIEs nationally, as you know.
That's a great segue because when David presents, he'll have a bit of a handicap since Scotland and most of Europe has, unique patient IDs. So a lot of these problems we're trying to solve are self-inflicted in many ways,
right?
Just to get to the starting line, which is unfortunate, but fortunate probably as well. Some of the ethical challenges of having so much information about people in some places is challenging. Well, we have gone into double overtime, so that's excellent. You're in the rare group of double overtimer presenters, which is a badge of honor and courage. So I want to thank you for joining us. I know everybody's so interested in what what you're forging, the road you're forging ahead, and helps to be very, to hear it and see the progress over time and the focus on, those, not boiling the ocean. You're making really good progress in specific areas, which is great. So I invite you to, I'll share the material. We'll share the recording on the hub. I put the link in there. If people want to get it who are new to the call, we put up all the recordings, and they're great listening sometimes. And then sometimes you just have to mull over the slides. They're so rich. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us again. And I hope that you'll come if we do this synthesis session in a couple of weeks, in a month or so, that you'll lend your shoulder to the flywheel here. And with that, I think we're off next week, and then we're back on with HR with the ERHA the following week after that. So everyone have a great weekend, and not a weekend yet. It's only Wednesday, right? Thinking too far ahead. We'll see you next in a couple of weeks here. And thanks for all the time you spent putting this together.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for all the questions. Appreciate it.